Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Liza Long. I'm an associate professor of English at the College of Western Idaho, and my partner.
Hi, I'm Jason Blumquist. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Nursing at Boise State University, and we are your Gen AI Fellows for the State Board of Education this year. Happy to
And
be talking with you again.
yeah, we're so excited to be here. So, one thing that we know is concerning to a lot of you in the classroom are ethical considerations around AI. Whether you're using it or not, you're probably encountering some issues, maybe with academic integrity. So, in this presentation, we wanted to do a deeper dive into some key issues and practices for using AI ethically in education. And I have to stress as we get into this that there are so many ethical issues around artificial intelligence that what Jason and I chose to focus on in our presentation were things that are pretty specific to your classroom and your course. So we're not really going to get into the weeds on some things that might concern you. I know my own biggest concern is climate change, for example. We won't even talk about that today. But if you have ideas for future webinars or you want to do a deeper dive into some of those more philosophical questions about ethics, please just let us know on the form with the state resource book. We'll get that in the chat, and we'll look forward to hearing your concerns and things that you want us to cover. Let's head to the next slide, Jason.
Too far. There we go.
Great. Oh, that's too far. There we go. So we have just 4 learning objectives, as I mentioned, and we're going to be kind of really focusing on your classroom. First, we want you to think about strategies around academic integrity. This is the number one thing that both Jason and I hear about from our colleagues. So we'll definitely be trying to address some of your concerns, but also give you some strategies that might help you as a teacher. We will be considering ethical implications of equity, accessibility, and also bias in the AI training set. And we'll talk about briefly how that can impact your students' learning experience in the classroom. One thing that's a big concern to me, and I presented a previous webinar on this with Reed Hepler from CSI, is the importance of safeguarding both your student privacy and your own privacy when you're using these tools. So we'll touch briefly on that. And then finally, we will focus on making sure that you are transparent in your communication about your policies so that students understand when or if they can use generative artificial intelligence in your course. So Jason's going to take us into that first topic.
Excellent. So, like Liza mentioned, there's three areas that we really want to touch on first. Plagiarism concerns the idea of authorship and copyright issues, as well as how difficult it is right now to be able to detect these. So, as far as the plagiarism side of things, one of the questions that I think we're all struggling to answer right now is using content that a generative AI produces actually plagiarism, right? I mean, plagiarism is taking somebody else's work and presenting it as your own. And there's a lot of questioning right now whether a AI that has been trained on a lot of other work, if it's actually able to go back and look at those things, whether it's just a mathematical model. So when you're getting something out of AI, are you really using somebody else's work? Now, we're not going to argue that if you just cut and paste out of an AI, that it's clearly not doing the work yourself and presenting something that isn't yours. So there is the ethical side of how do we use AI as a co-author or a co-intelligence rather than just cutting and pasting out of it. So I personally am not as concerned about the ability to have an AI go back and like word for word pick out something that Liza wrote somewhere. So I'm not as concerned about it being able to do that, but I am concerned about our students who aren't critically thinking about how they're using AI or what that AI is outputting. So really starting to think about how do we design assignments, and this is something we'll get into in our third webinar of the fall. How do we design assignments? How do we think about using AI in a way that is helping our students learn versus allowing them to have the work done for them and shortchange that learning process?
Right. And I wanted to speak briefly along those lines about authorship and copyright issues. I am an author. One of my books was scraped as part of the Books3 data set. I am a member of the Authors Guild class that is suing OpenAI and others for using work without our permission. That being said, I am kind of a post-copyright person. Those of you who've known me from the open education world know that I've been producing a lot of content and openly licensing it for a long time. So I do practice that co-intelligence and that co-writing model that Jason mentioned. We're referring to Ethan Mollick's book, Co-Intelligence. It's a great read. And Mollick is a professor at Wharton who has embraced teaching with generative AI. Like you, Jason, I am less concerned with cheating per se when I think about AI. I'm much more concerned about these questions of authorship and attribution and making sure that students are not harming themselves or their learning by relying on generative AI as too much of a crutch. There's some emerging research that's showing that in the right circumstances, generative AI tools can actually promote learning, but when they're not used correctly, they absolutely can harm our student learning. So I think that just makes intuitive sense to us. If a student copies and pastes something that AI writes, that student's not really learning that material. So these questions of authorship and copyright are thorny, specifically with copyright. Back to, who is the author of this work, right? So you can't copyright stuff that's created by AI right now. I'm not a lawyer, Jason's not a lawyer, but we've been following this conversation with great interest. And so that's certainly a concern if you are co-writing like I am, or teaching students how to use generative AI. I think being aware of these issues and being transparent about them with your students is important. And Jason, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about those magical plagiarism checkers.
One more thought on the copyright issue. Since it is really muddy at the moment in a lot of ways, not only are how these AI models are using information to train, but what we are putting in or what we're getting out. I think the biggest advice is, if it feels a little off, like you're not sure if you should be putting something into the AI or not, then don't. And we're going to talk more specifically later when we get to the privacy pieces, but absolutely being really careful, especially with your student work or the work of others without that proper attribution. So yeah, so the question is, how do we find out if a student is using AI or not? Are they using it correctly, or are they just cutting and pasting? The magic AI detectors, the general consensus at this point is that they are not a black and white ability to say yes or no that student used AI in that process. The major ones like Turnitin or some of the other ChatGPT Zero, that type of thing, they're creating probability scores on whether that student used it or not, and that can be problematic, right? Some of them are claiming to be over 90% accurate, but at the same time, I'm not sure as a teacher with the relationships with my students if I'm willing to risk 10% false positive, right? I mean, how does that affect our relationship and our trust with our students and their trust in us if we are accusing them of academic integrity issues without really hard and fast evidence? There's
And
also
Jason,
oh, go ahead, Liza.
Yeah. I was just going to say, one thing I would add is, if you have not tried to submit some of your own work to these checkers, that can be a really interesting experience. I apparently am a robot, and all of my work is written by ChatGPT. So I tried GPT Zero fairly early on. It flagged my work as AI written, and there we are. So yeah, you've got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I think you can try that yourself. I've heard stories of students who were accused then taking some of their professor's work from way back before AI ever was around in academia, and demonstrating how it may flag it inappropriately. There's also some discussion around how AI plagiarism detectors and AI generated detectors might negatively affect students with English as a second language or some of those other areas as well, and flag them at a higher rate with or without a lot of evidence. So
yeah,
I think
one thing you certainly shouldn't do, you should definitely not ask ChatGPT if your student plagiarized. So,
correct. Yeah. So, I mean, that brings us along the idea with some academic integrity of how do we think about addressing some of those pieces, right? So, I think what we need to really consider is looking at our current academic integrity honor codes. I hear this come up a lot in conversation, that a lot of these issues that we're dealing with around AI are not necessarily new issues. AI just has exacerbated them and shown some light on them again. So, here at Boise State University, we have not written a new academic integrity policy around specifically AI, because we do feel like the current one fits. So if you have a student that you're worried they are using AI inappropriately, I'd suggest having a conversation with them, just like we would currently right now. If I've got a student that I'm worried that they're presenting work that wasn't their own, rather than immediately going towards discipline and shutting down, I want to find out first how that happened. Like, how did you create this assignment? What was your process? And more often than not, in my experience, that allows us to have that just culture style conversation and get down to the root cause of what's going on versus simply creating a negative relationship there with that student.
I think that's such an important point, Jason. And I know in my own classes, I've actually had a pretty open AI use policy, and I've ensured students that no matter what they do, if they just tell me whether they're using AI, they're not going to get in trouble. And what I've found by taking this policy is that when students do use AI inappropriately, they're pretty quick to admit it. And also, when I focus on how I want to help the student and I want to make sure that they're learning and that they're prepared for the workforce, they see me as a partner in this. So I've had some great conversations, just like you, Jason, with students around AI use every day, really. I'll have students come talk to me because we all know some, but especially for newbies, there are some tells, right? That maybe the word delve, I think, came up at some point, right? So sometimes you think you have a nose for this, and you might, but again, there are some studies that show we're actually much worse at catching generative AI than we think we are. So again, we have to be careful, and AI is constantly evolving and changing. I know for myself, I've written a custom GPT that writes like me, right down to all the M dashes and exclamation points. So certainly, if I know how to do that, some of my more tech savvy students have figured out how to do that as well. But I think just fostering an environment in your classroom where you can have those discussions, where you can talk about when it's appropriate and when it's not, and how it might actually harm student learning, that's the important thing.
Yeah, I think this also really starts to bleed into the conversation of what is the important aspect that that student teacher relationship brings to education, right? As we hear more and more of, well, AI can just teach everybody, it'll be fine, we don't need teachers anymore. I think that's glossing over some of those important pieces of that relationship and that human connection. And I do believe as we see more and more AI tools, those human factors and those types of interaction, the skills are going to be that much more important. So being able to continue to foster those. I also think this will again will bleed into some of our other webinars. It needs us to pause and really think about what the purpose and the outcomes we're looking at in particular assignments, right? And how do we design assignments that get back to those learning outcomes versus just the product, which at this point AI is getting pretty good at creating product.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing you can do is think about training as well. So we'll provide links. Joel Glad and I developed some AI ethics training that he has now rolled out to all the CWI 101 courses. And we've used it also in a lot of our writing courses. So actually explaining to students what the ethical concerns around AI are can be an important way to educate them. We have to remember these tools are new to them too, right? We're all learning alongside each other with these things. So providing them information on how LLMs work, how they are trained, the biases in the data set, the harm to people in the global south, the environmental concerns again, right? This can help students to be more critical consumers and also help them to be more skeptical. And I think using these tools skeptically is a good idea. And also, we have clear expectations in behavior modeling. So I use AI a lot as well. I try to be very clear both in my syllabus and on individual assignments, explaining what some appropriate uses of AI might be and what uses I don't want them to do. I was actually kind of surprised that this worked in my fully online mythology class. But if you're seeing a problem with this in discussion posts, I had a bunch of students who submitted clearly AI written discussion posts, and I kind of went on a little rant. I made a video for them, and I said, y'all, this stuff is so boring. I don't care what AI thinks because it doesn't think. I want to know what you think, right? I'm not grading you on your grammar, punctuation, and spelling. And I just encouraged them and told them what I expected and what I was looking for in the assignment. I also showed them exactly how they could cheat. I was like, here, look, I put the prompt in. Look, I know you can do this. You know you can do this. This isn't what I'm looking for, right? So modeling that for them, I think, was important, and then showing them what I did want instead. I had 100% compliance, great discussion posts this week just after modeling that behavior. And also when I use AI, I'm transparent about it. I cite and acknowledge. So I often will use it to help me with assignment prompts or rubrics at this point. And I cite it. I say, I used Copilot or I used ChatGPT to help me with this rubric. And students appreciate that. They see it.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting discussion because we talk a lot about disclosing our use right now, and I think that is going to evolve over time, right? I'm not disclosing every time that I use a spell checker or those types of things. But as we're all learning about this, I think it is important for us to talk openly about the ways that we're experimenting with it as well as teachers, because remember, this is all of us learning about this together right now.
Right.
And I don't think it has to be an all or nothing. Uh, Liza and I both teach courses in our own areas where we have some expectations where they could use AI however they want. And I've got some courses where I have limited it, and I have talked with them and I'm transparent about why on this particular assignment I will only allow you to use it in a particular way, or why it's important in this one that maybe you don't use AI at all because of what I
Mhm.
want you to be doing in that assignment. So being able to have that conversation, again, back to that open dialogue, we can't do that if we're not talking about it, right? Um, and not all of our students are immediately driving into these tools. I've been doing some survey work with our nursing students, and it turns out, and Liza says this about her students as well, a lot of our students are scared of it because they don't want to be accused of academic
Yes.
integrity issues. And they aren't clear on when it is okay and isn't okay. And so if we're not talking about it, it's either going to be done in the shadows, or we're going to have students that are really frightened with kind of where their standing is as well.
Right. And like kind of back to what we were saying about our own work being flagged as being AI generated, our good writers are actually going to possibly be punished, like students who are quote good writers unquote, right? Because that's kind of what AI looks for when it writes is to model that kind of behavior. I've actually even taught my writing students to be a little defensive, to use version history, to take screenshots of their work at various times, just in case, right? So that they can demonstrate labor. So I think these conversations are definitely ongoing. And I agree, Jason, just like spell check, these tools will evolve. But I really personally, in my own use, like tracking how I am using them right now. And I ask students to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Trying to get it to move. Yep.
I guess we should say, in the interest of full disclosure, too, that we actually did use a wonderful AI tool, Jason, that you found, Gamma.app. It's very fun for creating presentations. I like to use it with Claude AI and then have Claude generate some content and bring it over. So with my own ideas, of course, right? So if you're looking for a way to up your presentation game, you could check Gamma.app out. So one important consideration that we've kind of touched on and talked around already, though, but I really want to stress, is that this conversation about academic integrity with our students depends on promoting digital literacy. And a lot of us have been doing that anyway, right, in the information age. But we cannot assume that our students are aware or know about not only the ethical issues around AI, but just AI itself. Not every student even knows how to use these tools or where to find them. And so making sure that students are aware that they know capabilities. In my case, at my school, we're a Microsoft school, so I make sure they all know that they have access to Copilot. Maybe at your school, they all have access to Gemini, letting them know which tools they have access to so that they're not like paying for some weird app that doesn't do as great a job as the existing apps. But also like really helping them to be skeptical and critical thinkers around AI generated content. I do think this is going to be incredibly important for our future citizens, not to mention an important skill in the workplace. Being able to evaluate the output of AI is very important. So, like in my writing classes, we are using AI for formative assessment feedback at every step of the writing process. However, part of that is for the student to provide feedback on the AI output. And that's been really interesting because I told them right up front, you don't have to agree with what the AI tells you. Right. So it's really fun for them to treat that as a critical thinking exercise. Another part of digital literacy is to focus on ethical use. Again, those trainings, and I'll make sure we have links to those in our book as well. It's like an H5P module that you can plug into any learning management system. It's really easy for students to use. And then also just the idea, and this is the challenge, Jason. I mean, I think we're tired, right? We're all still tired from COVID, and now here comes this big change. But it does require from us that we are learners, right? We have to approach these tools with humility, and we have to find a way to stay abreast of the changes. I know for myself, last week was one of those exhausting weeks. I think Chat GPT-01, the Strawberry model launched. We had Notebook LM all over the place. I felt very overwhelmed last week on Monday. I thought, oh my goodness, I've got so much new stuff to learn. But it's important for me and for my students that I try to stay on top of those education advancements. One of my colleagues joked that we should all get a 3-credit course release, and I don't know, maybe we need to argue for that, right? Just to kind of figure out what's going on with these tools and how they're impacting our teaching and our learning. Yeah, but so keep digital literacy in mind is the important takeaway here.
And you can start small. I know that a lot of us we're all across the spectrum of maybe you've never even tried any of these tools, maybe to the other end. So a little plug, we added a new chapter in our press book this week with 20 ideas of how to take 20 minutes and play with an AI model, with some step-by-step which model to try and how to make it do a couple things, just so you can start exploring and have fun with it, because you might find that it's really great for some things and you want to incorporate that in your classwork, and you might find it's really not helpful at all in other things. So there's no right answer, and this did not come with an instruction manual. So we're all learning together.
That is a really fun chapter that you created, Jason. I just love it. So check that out. And also, if you are doing something creative with AI in your classroom, remember, we'd love to see it. There's a feedback form in that state resource textbook as well, where you can share the good stuff you're doing with AI.
Absolutely. I think you were starting this one, Liza.
So I was going to say equity and accessibility. I was just looking at my notes. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so we're moving on to our second learning outcome now, but it's kind of tied to what we were just saying about digital literacy, right? Like we shouldn't assume that all students know about their access. And we also really, just as we focused on the digital divide in the past, we need to continue to be very mindful of that. I teach at a community college, so this is something that's always kind of top of mind for me. And I do keep in mind that our students don't necessarily have equal access to these tools, right? We're fortunate at our school that they do all have access to Copilot, and that's something I'm not, Microsoft doesn't pay me or anything. It's just that's what my students have. So that's what I encourage them to use. And also sometimes sticking with one tool can be helpful for students when they're learning. And that's a pretty comprehensive tool they can use. So really keeping that in mind. For AI bias, we could do, I don't know, a whole webinar on this. When you think about how you're teaching AI in your class, it's important to frame the conversation around the idea that the data set is biased, right? And so one person I really like to recommend that students read is Joy Buolamwini. She's an MIT computer scientist who has focused specifically on facial recognition algorithms, and she's got a great TED talk about this. You can look her up. But she talks about how bias in facial recognition algorithms has really harmed people in the physical world. And I think we have to keep in mind that these harms are real. So again, reinforcing to students that these things exist, that you are aware of them, I think is important to building all of our literacy around these tools. And then finally, there are financial barriers, and many of these most complicated, like I know Jason's in my favorite tool, Claude, it's behind a paywall, right? Like the really cool bells and whistles are behind a paywall. So, and I think we'll see more and more of that. Obviously, these have been very expensive technologies to develop, and so there's going to be a cost, and we want to be mindful of that with our students. And then finally, technical challenges are very real, not just the infrastructure and support, but even just the level of technical confidence that our students might have, right? I think we all know, I love that the picture here is phones, because we all know that our students are really phone savvy. And I've had some success by letting them use their phones and letting them use the apps. That seems to be sometimes an easier way for them to enter into these conversations with generative AI tools. Do you have anything to add there, Jason, or?
No, I think that was a great summary. I think to your point, we could spend a long time discussing some of the biases and inequities, and that can be built in. Um, I also think that we see that a lot just with our general interactions with each other, and I think there
Mm.
are some models with how we work with each other that we need to think about when we're working with AI as well, right?
All
Which
right.
leads into our next topic, which is what are some frameworks that we might be able to use? Because this is so overwhelming. And I don't know that we have to create a brand new ethical framework for AI. But I forget who said it. Somebody had likened it the other day that we're all taking part in the largest social experiment in the history of humans, and we didn't ask to be part of that. And here we are,
We thought it was social media, but we were
right?
wrong.
So I wanted like to offer a couple ideas of existing ethical frameworks that we use in healthcare and in nursing specifically that I think actually work really well for the idea of AI. In healthcare, we talk a lot about autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, and confidentiality. And I think that works really well. One, for us as individuals thinking about when and how we might want to use AI, and as a concept that we could teach our students as well. So the idea of autonomy is that we each have our ability to make our own decisions, right? Sometimes we, in dark humor that we sometimes have in healthcare, say that means that everybody's got a right to make their own bad decisions. But it does mean that to be able to make decisions, you need to have the knowledge to make an informed decision about things as well. And I think there's risk with AI that becomes very good at making decisions. That if we completely outsource those decisions to the AI without human interaction or whatnot, we can start to harm autonomy as well. So we need to be thinking about how we're using AI in that regard and how we are informing ourselves about some of the things that we've been talking about in this webinar. I can't decide whether I should or shouldn't use AI if I don't understand a little bit about how it works and what those impacts are, right? Now, maleficence is simply do no harm. So very much similar to what we've been talking about throughout here. Are you creating harm to other individuals with AI usage? Beneficence, how are we doing it to benefit each other? Justice goes right back into some of those bias ideas. And confidentiality really plays into some of the privacy pieces that Liza is going to talk with. So I think we have some models. These are all ethical concepts that we have talked about and figured out for hundreds and hundreds of years in the human experience. So I think we can still think about those same things with AI. Now, the nursing delegation framework is something that we are experimenting with, teaching our students as to when and how to use AI for a task. So, in nursing, we are a licensed profession, and within that scope of law, there are certain things that we reserve the right to do as nurses. But I can ask somebody else that is not a licensed nurse, say a certified nursing assistant or somebody, to do some of those tasks through a legal framework of delegation. But in order to do that, I need to do it correctly. I need to have the right task, meaning, is this an appropriate task for that person to do? If I know how to do it and I'm delegating to Liza, do I know that this is an appropriate task for her to do? She's got the skills, she has the wherewithal to do that. Is it the right circumstance, right? Yeah, I think about this in nursing. I could have somebody else go get a blood pressure on a patient, but the circumstance would be is if that patient is crashing, I should probably be the one to go check on that patient, not send some random person. The right person, and this I'm gonna in the world of AI, I'm gonna say the right model. We've got all sorts of different models and tools that do different things. So what's the right tool for the task that you're trying to do at that point? The right supervision, meaning that I need to be able to then go back and find out what they did and if they did it well, because I'm still accountable for that action, even though I delegated it to somebody else. And then the right direction and communication. I need to be able to clearly explain what I need them to do, how to ensure that they know what I'm asking for, and then coming back and telling me that it got done and giving me the results of those things. So I think that really actually fits really well with AI. If we were starting to offload some of our tasks, is it the right task? Is it the right circumstance to let somebody else do that task? Have I used the right AI model to do that task appropriately? Did I supervise it? And did I come back and actually find out what it gave us and was it appropriate? It's a fancy way of saying that human in the loop, that term that we're seeing, but really being thoughtful about how we're being that human.
I just loved that framework, Jason. I think like all of us could maybe think about existing ethical frameworks in our fields and maybe take that same kind of thought experiment to consider how that maps to AI. That was such a great example. Thank you. We're going to shift over to privacy concerns, which were also mentioned in our learning outcomes. And as I said previously, this is a big concern for me. And I want my students to be much more aware about it. And I want my colleagues to be more aware of it as well. Now, I've linked to a presentation here by Dr. Tori Trust, which is kind of astonishingly thorough. She only does cover Gemini, Copilot, and ChatGPT, but she goes through their terms of service very extensively and kind of walks you through what the terms of service allow them to do with anything that you put into their tools. So the way that these tools like ChatGPT are set up, it looks very much like something we're already familiar with, a Google search. And many of us were already perhaps ignorantly, but not entirely ignorantly, giving up some of our privacy by using something like a Google search, right? That I joked with someone, one of my friends said, well, that's why I use DuckDuckGo. And I'm like, well, I use Google because it knows everything about me. So it's going to return the best results for me. But it knows everything about me. These are very real concerns for these AI tools. So you'll want to think about things like permission. So for example, ChatGPT, we have a lot of dual credit enrollment students in my classes, and I may need to get parental permission if I decide I'm going to use ChatGPT as my tool. Again, that's another reason I've switched to Copilot, because that's just something that the school provides, and we have a secure environment with our Copilot for students. Know how they're sharing your data. Know how your privacy is protected. Really, really stress to students that they should not be putting any sensitive or personal information into these tools ever, ever, ever. One exercise where we found AI can be really helpful with my students, especially my capstone courses, is in taking their resumes and matching them to job descriptions to create drafts of cover letters. It's really good at that. And hey, the audience is actually probably an AI. So that seems like a pretty smart idea, right? But what we always want to make sure students understand is they should strip any personally identifiable information from that resume before they do a task like that, or really from anything that they might use AI for. With my ethics training, I let my students know that the one absolutely prohibited use of AI in my class is to copy and paste another person's work into the tool. So you should never use it for peer review. This goes back to privacy, copyright, and consent, right? You don't have permission to use your classmates' work in that way, so you shouldn't do it. And similarly, I have a deal with my students that I will not do that with their papers. In a few cases, I've explicitly gotten written consent from my students because I wanted to see how it graded, honestly. But I understood that that was a privacy concern, stripped their personal data from that, and I had explicit written consent to do exactly what I did, right? Some of us are familiar with institutional review boards. I mean, really treat this seriously, just like you would an IRB study, right? Be very careful about what you're putting into these tools. And we do think Claude seems to be the most FERPA compliant based on how it's managing data. I think their default is that they don't use anything you put in there for their training models. The others, the default, you can turn that off, but the default is that they do use your work to train. But if you're interested, that presentation from Dr. Trust, I think, is kind of astonishing. It covers a lot of ethical issues in AI that you might be curious about more than just privacy concerns. It's about 80 slides long. It's very comprehensive. And she's licensed at Creative Commons. So you could maybe use parts of it or all of it if you wanted to explore these issues further. Anything to add to that, Jason?
I'd say be very aware of whether your school has policies related to this.
Yeah.
On a national level, I have seen some universities have determined that they believe that certain models are FERPA compliant and are okay with it. Other schools are not. For example, at Boise State, it is explicitly written that we are not to input any student work into an AI model. Now, that might change over time, and I don't know that every school has a policy or not at the moment, but it's worth checking. And I think the bottom line is it comes back to exactly what Liza was saying. Authorship and being able to acknowledge where you're getting it from and using information carefully and appropriately is the key here.
Absolutely key. Yeah. Thank you, Jason.
So we really invite you to think about these things and then start to consider how you might apply them as far as developing your own policies within your course, right? And we're using the term course policies pretty specifically here because that could include everything from your syllabus statements to specific instructions on an assignment about how you might want to use it, to your open or not disclosure of how you're using it in your class. We're not here to solve university or state policy at the moment, but we do want you to think about how you might do it in your own classroom. So this is going to sound familiar. It's a lot of what we've been talking about already, but establish guidelines, right? What do you want or not want in your classroom? But having that open dialogue by establishing the guidelines and saying it out loud, right? Um, Again, a lot of our students are confused. They're worried, and by being able to talk through what you are or are not allowing in your class is going to be really important to be able to set those guidelines so that you can hold each other accountable as well. So yes, looking at your boundaries, like we had talked about a little bit earlier, I've got some classes where I have a pretty open, you can use it for whatever you want, but let me know. And I've got other classes where it comes down to the specific assignment piece or the specific activity. But I'm very clear and try to be very transparent about why I have those different boundaries in place for those different assignments so that students understand. And because I'm also doing a lot of AI literacy, sometimes they come to me and say, "We've got a boundary that we'd like to put in place." Right? This is actually an assignment that it would be easier not to use AI on, or it's again having that conversation and having some of that disclosure and modeling the behavior. I like we said, I do think the how we disclose is going to change over time, but right now, I think it's really important to demonstrate that I'm being thoughtful about when I'm using it and how I'm telling people that I'm using it as well.
Mhm.
If you have specific citation requirements, make sure you let them know. That could be as formal as APA and a few of the other writing standards have ways to cite AI, and I've seen a lot of other versions with colleagues where it's just a simple sentence at the end that says, "Hey, I use this model to do this thing within the assignment," um, and that's it. I've often typically asked them to, if they're going to do it that way, then to also tell me did they find it helpful or not within their assignment, and start getting some of that self-reflection going on as well. That's just me. I'm a huge proponent of reflective practices in learning. And then finally, regular updates. This stuff is changing so fast that I really do think you need to be thoughtful from one semester to the next and one class to the next as to what you are finding to be the appropriate level. Uh, but again, the bottom line is talk to your students about this. Make
Mhm.
sure that we're learning together and that we are talking about it openly so that we don't have that gray area which gets us all in trouble.
If I could just add one thing to that too, I thought, Jason, as you were talking about defining boundaries, I'm actually for the first time teaching a class where AI use is required. You actually need to use an AI tool in order to complete the assignments in the class. And thinking along these lines and around the ethics of AI, I think it's important to acknowledge when students don't want to use these tools. Right? And in the past, I've always had opt-out assignments. The way I've structured my current English 102 class, it is really focused on integrating AI and into formative assessment. So there's no way for students to opt out. But what I did, back to being really clear about expectations and policies, is I emailed all those students the week before and I said, hey, here's what's going on. If this is not what you're looking for in a class, you've got time, right, to drop my class and find somebody else's. I still have full enrollment, so I guess the students stayed, and they are all loving AI. But I think it's important to give everybody the opportunity to choose not to use these tools if they have strongly held ethical beliefs that prohibit them from using the tools.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. So as we begin to wrap up and think about next steps, one, this is an ongoing conversation. Um, and though we've done a lot of work and thought on this ourselves, we're certainly not trained ethicists. And I know that there are a lot of folks that have a lot of different ideas about these pieces. And I think that's actually a really powerful moment where we can, across all of our different specialties and schools, really be coming together and talking about it, right? Um,
Mhm.
One of my favorite groups on campus to hang out with is the Social Impacts of Computing group at Boise State, which is actually housed in the philosophy department. And they're talking about how computing and how AI impacts. So have conversations. talk to each other and your students as we learning moving forward. So we do need to continually do continuous education. We're not all going to be computer scientists, and that's okay, because what we need to understand is how this technology and AI impacts our areas. Keep doing that interdisciplinary collaboration, like I said. Keep refining what your policies, not just for your course, are, but now as we're starting to think about it and see the impacts, be advocates within your schools as well. And if we need bigger overarching policies, let's figure out what those look like together so that they work well for us and our students. And then we just need to be, like we are in everything as teachers, that leadership example. We need to be able to demonstrate how to use this ethically, how to have these conversations. And at that point, sometimes it's okay also to admit that we don't know yet, so let's figure it out together. I think that's part of modeling ethical leadership as well. So with that, thank you. I know that when we present this in a week or so, Liza will be available to have some question and answer session here. I apologize that I wasn't there in person for that first piece. But we do have some links here to some local resources as well. The first one, The Introduction to Ethics in Higher Education, was a book written by a number of Idaho educators and academic leaders, and really is a student-facing book on some ethical pieces that they could think about. And then Liza, the second one.
Yeah, so the second one is part of that training that I mentioned that's free for students. It's faculty have also enjoyed it, especially if it's at the intro level. But this is one chapter out of a more comprehensive training on writing and artificial intelligence, and it's specifically focused on ethical concerns. And the follow-up chapter also gives detailed information for citing in MLA and APA styles, since those are the most common formats our students use. So if you're looking for a place to start with your students, or if you're open to letting them use the tools in your class, this might be a good resource for them. There's an H5P module I think I mentioned that you can put into your LMS. So it can actually be a graded assignment even if you want it to be. But overall, I know we just really skimmed the surface of this topic. Jason, there's so much more we could cover, but we really are curious about your thoughts. So please do reach out, let us know. And we're really looking forward to our next webinar, where we're going to kind of get into more of a hands-on engagement with AI. So maybe think about an assignment that you might want to practice with incorporating AI into it. So maybe an existing assignment or a new assignment that you're thinking about. And just like with our first workshop, I'm anticipating we're going to have some actual work time in our third workshop where we talk about engaging students through assignments.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.